often viral tweets about the Sixers on Twitter, and I, of course, use some of his tweets for my talking points, literally in my videos. So, thanks for joining me, Sean. What's going on, man?
Yeah, appreciate that. Appreciate you having me on. And I'm excited to be chopping it up about the Sixers. Still very excited about this team. I do hate that we're in the lull of the offseason, that there's not too much to talk about these days, not too much basketball being played or going on. But you know what? It was a successful offseason. We can relish in that. We can talk all about it.
Yeah, I think it was too, man. Do I have a sickness where I don't enjoy summer anymore? Like, the more I got into this, and now that it's become kind of my life, with the 2 months of no Sixers, I'm like, I hate it. Am I supposed to hate the summer?
Yeah, I think like I'm kind of in the same spot, and I think it got pushed back the fact that we did have a little Olympics this year, got Joel Embiid representing, saw Summer League, all that kind of things. It's like now hitting like a brick wall. It's like there's just nothing for a straight period of time, and especially we still got a couple more weeks till football. Maybe that's a little bit of a distraction, but no, there's no cure to the Sixers sickness like seeing them on the floor. So it needed to happen as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I guess the Phillies can't really be much of a distraction, at least lately.
Yeah, although we did just get a Kyle Schwarber grand slam during our countdown here, so maybe they're back. Who knows?
Nice,
Save the
nice,
season.
nice. Yeah, save the season, man. Yeah, we're gonna chop it up about a couple things. Thank you all for being here. Everybody, give us a like one time. Be active in the chat, and give us your takes and everything. And we're just gonna talk about all that transpired so far and what we think about this upcoming season. So, I guess not huge news, but at least on more of a news side of things, Joel Embiid contract extension expected. Now, when I was going through the numbers, this sounded a little bit crazy to me. Not that the Sixers won't extend him, but with Joel Embiid, he would have to waive his player option for 26-27 and sign a new 3-year, $192 million max that would pay him a whopping $69 million in 2028. And then I started thinking, what about Paul George in 2028? What about Tyrese Maxey in 2028? Paul George in 2028 will be 38 years old. Joel Embiid in 2028 will be 34 years old. But 34 years old for a 7-footer with the injury history of Joel Embiid could be more like 50. We don't know. And Tyrese Maxey will be making $170 million in 3 players in 2028. It's a scary thought is all I'm saying. But in my opinion, of course, something you just got to do.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. It's a ton of money. There's no way to look around it. That even with like the new TV deal coming, the salary cap continuing to inflate, all these other factors you want to look at it, it is a ton of money. Now, what like these players in the NBA particularly got right in the negotiation standpoint here is it's always percentage of the cap, and that's why these max contracts are what they are. That's why we see these numbers inflate. And the pushback to each of these individual players making too much money for all those takes out there, my pushback to that is just you're just rooting for the owners to make in more money if you're mad about that. So I would rather go in these guys' pockets for it. It is a scary amount of money to be tied to those 3 guys specifically, but the reality is that's kind of a down the road problem to me. That I think you look at this as right now over the next 2 to 3 seasons, everything should be circling in on winning a championship. If this contract is going to be something that's lingering over the head or a bit of a distraction, just give him the extension and make things fine. Joel has more than paid his dues as far as watching these sins of this franchise play out in front of him for over a decade at this point. So it's definitely a lot of money. It's definitely not the easiest of that, but I kind of look at it as sign him up, ink him up, and you deal with that if it becomes an issue when it does become an issue.
Yeah, definitely. I always say Joel Embiid earned every penny. The only real negative thing I think people can say that's valid is his injury history, which is completely out of his control. As far as effort, heart, leaving it all out there, giving it everything to a team, he's absolutely done that, and you just have to. There's no way around it. You just have to hope. You just have to. He's so good when he's healthy. You just have to keep hoping that you're going to get at least 1 or 2 healthy playoff runs. What he did last year after knee surgery against the Knicks, averaging 30, 10, and 6. It's just insane, and it's like, what if we're always, what if we do get that 1 year, and that's what you're gambling. You're paying this to gamble. Like, what if we do get that 1 year where everything works out, and Yeah, if it, I compare it to the 2008 or 2008-9 Phillies sometimes with Ryan Howard. Like around 2011, it wasn't good anymore. They were still paying him $25 million a year. Everyone was booing him, but it won you a World Series. He was great when they paid him. It is what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's also kind of cool. It's so rare that we see this type of loyalty in the NBA these days. That players are hopping around teams like crazy. Joel has stuck it out. That he's lived through 4 different general managers. He's on his 3rd coach, over 100 different teammates, a ton of drama that has surrounded him. There's only 3 players in the entire NBA that have stuck with the original team that drafted him longer. It's Steph Curry, it's Giannis, and it's Chris Middleton somehow. Although I think there's some sort of technicality with the Joel not playing his 2 years, not with the draft year. But the bottom line is Joel's right there on that list and really does like encapsulate the Sixers more so or just as much as each of those players. So I definitely want him to retire as a Sixer. I think you should make that possible. And I think you should be rewarded for sticking it out through this. And the reality is like everything should be zeroed on this specific year or with the next 2 to 3 years, however you want to look at this window. If you win a championship, if you break that curse that we've been fighting forever for the Sixers team, no one's going to be caring if he's making way too much money down the line. So to me, get it done, even if it might hurt you a little bit when honestly push comes to shove and we get a couple years down.
Absolutely. And if it does win you that one championship possibly in since 1983, it's all worth it. There's, you just, yeah. So you do that. 2028, it is a ton of money. But again, yeah, I agree with your take too that, how much money are the owners making? How much money are the guys that are signing the checks making? Right. So, yeah, you just do it. Other, I guess, news is opening day. So some parts of the schedule came out for next season. Opening day, Doc Rivers returns to Philadelphia. Poor Doc Rivers has to walk into Philadelphia to open the season. Of course, he will definitely be greeted with cheers and respect, and nice things will be said about him by Philly fans who are respectful and level-headed. What's the quote from the Adam Sandler movie? Well, at least Philadelphia fans are definitely not overreactionary, whatever he said. What do you think about that? The Bucks on opening day in Philadelphia. Last year, I absolutely hated what happened in that game. The Bucks beat the Sixers by 1 point. I thought the NBA was pushing a Damian Lillard narrative way too obviously, so they could say that his debut with the Bucks was incredible. He was getting these arm hooks around screen flops for 3 free throws. It was just driving me insane. I would like to see less of that in the NBA this year, by the way, which I would like to see less of that in general in the NBA. But what do you think about Doc Rivers and the Bucks this upcoming season, and what do you think about that to open the season?
Yeah, for the Bucks as a whole, it's surprising to me how under the radar they're flying. That like, I get it. Like, I'm not here to stick up and say I believe in the Milwaukee Bucks to a massive extent, but it is kind of interesting to me that when you talk about the big teams in the East, the conversation is constantly the Celtics, the Knicks, and the Sixers. Is kind of the 3 teams there, and really Celtics, Sixers, Knicks is the better way to put that. The Bucks are just kind of lurking in the background, and again, I'm not overly confident in this team. I do think Damian Lillard is mostly cooked, or at least the best version of him. I don't think he's coming back anytime soon, but if it's going to happen, it has to happen this year. They obviously made that change at the coaching staff midway through last year, which I think was a horrific mistake. We know what Doc Rivers does to teams and pretty much wiped them out of contention right there. I get that you can lean on injuries being the overall factor with Giannis and with Dame down the stretch there. I don't know if that's changing this year. I don't believe in this Bucks team a great deal, but they're still going to be a talented team that is tough to put up with on a night-to-night basis. So I do think game 1 will be a dogfight, and we're going to get a bit of a test with this Sixers team. It's going to be fun to watch the Doc Rivers return to Philly, because that is the first time since the one game they played after Doc Rivers was in Milwaukee. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be fun. It'll be a good test. They always give the Sixers fits because of their size. Yeah. The Sixers still really, it seems like Daryl Morey's going with this 3-and-D players on the perimeter outside around Joel Embiid. There's this talk that the Sixers need a power forward, and we'll probably get into that. So they always do kind of struggle with the Milwaukee Bucks as far as the Bucks' size. Brook Lopez turns into Olympic Steph Curry every time he plays the Sixers. So it'll be fun to watch. But my take, I cannot believe the Milwaukee Bucks. I can't believe it happened. What what they did last year. I think it's absolutely insane, and it just reiterates that just because somebody's in a position of ownership does not mean that they have any clue what they're doing. And one of the biggest problems is owners can overstep everybody anytime they want and make a major decision. And it's crazy. I see the Bucks probably imploding in the next couple of years because, like you said, Damian Lillard's not getting any younger. I think Drew Holiday checks way more boxes than Damian Lillard offensively, defensively. I think they hurt themselves making that trade in the first place, and then the Doc Rivers signing was just doesn't make any sense to me. But it will be fun. I might just happen to be there to join in the boos that will rain down from the stands. Definitely.
Yeah, I like it. The one thing that does keep me from being like fully out on the Bucks or fully rolling them out, I still think Giannis is gonna have a chip on his shoulder and is still every bit of like the top 5 talent across the NBA that we've seen from him. He's frustrating because he is a guy that, stylistically isn't my cup of tea as far as basketball player, that he is a put his head down and drive, but the dude is just relentless the way that he works, does it on both ends of the floor, and I do think he's going to return with something to prove this year. So there's definitely a ton to poke in that team when it comes to, Doc Rivers, of course, Damian Lillard, all these type of things that we want to put out. But I also kind of like from the Sixers angle, we are going to see him tested right out of the gate. That I don't want this cakewalk for the Sixers team. It should be a little bit of like, you need to bring it. We need to figure out how to play together. We need to play in some crunch time games throughout the entirety of the season. So if that happens in night 1, I don't think that's a bad thing whatsoever.
You think that's what happened last year? Part of that like 8-1 start or whatever it was, 7-0, 8-1. We were talking about how much we won the James Harden trade, or at least I was, because I'm overreact to everything. I thought this was a clear championship favorite the first 8 games of the season. And then the second half of the season, things went a little bit the other way, and people were reminding me that, hey, the first half of the season was an easy schedule. The second half of the season was the hardest schedule in the NBA. So maybe this season I come into it a little bit more reserved. I don't know. It doesn't really work out that way for me, no matter what. But because the logics just leave me when it comes to Sixers basketball. But yeah, maybe I'm a little bit more. Let's see what happens if we start out 8-0, but 3 of them were the Wizards and Hornets. You know what I mean? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting part about last year is it felt like we had such hope from the regard that, like, the crown jewel of that James Harden trade was still those draft picks that came in. That was the real selling point. That, yes, Nico Batum was awesome. Marcus Morris exceeded expectations. KJ Martin was fine. That there were players that they got back that certainly made it at least a difference in what this team needed from a rotation standpoint, but really was those draft picks. So I was always looking at it as this team looks good. They might be one piece away and can truly get there. And then we never got that piece. That the trade deadline kind of came and went. Buddy Hield was not the needle mover that I think all of us were hoping for. And there never was that kind of big-time trade that Daryl Morey was pretty open about, that he's either finally trading James Harden for either an impact player or the assets to get one. Well, now that player has arrived in Paul George. That now there's an actual look at what this team is. And I get it didn't play out as connective, although if you want to look at it through this lens, you could make the argument that giving James Harden to Los Angeles aided in Paul George even being available and coming to Philadelphia. I think there is certainly some logic there. But the bottom line from the Sixers team is that trio, that final piece, he's finally arrived in Philadelphia. That trio of Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid, I do believe is the best in the NBA. I do believe is legit, and I think we can look at that from the more optimistic lens starting from day 1.
Best trio in the NBA. You heard it here first from Sean Bernard. The best trio in the NBA. Yeah, so like if you really think about it, that team was just thrown together. That wasn't planned at all. That was just like whatever we get in the James Harden return, we're just going to play these guys. And also Kelly Oubre turned into a good three-point shooter for a couple of games. But yeah, the fact that they even had a chance, they lost in the first round, but really if you beat the Knicks there, you have a good shot at beating the Pacers. You have a good shot at Eastern Conference Finals with a roster that was really not even really planned out, just like a bunch of expiring contracts thrown in, Robert Covington, Nicholas Batum, and those guys, KJ Martin. So this is the first time that Daryl Morey's really got to plan out how he wanted to build the roster piece by piece. It took a lot longer than it probably should have because of one contract that was on the books for way too long, 5-year contract, but total of 6 years. But yeah, this is like 20. It felt like forever. It felt like forever. Yeah, so this is the first time that Daryl Morey's got to build the team from the inside out with all of the flexibility. So if we look at their success last year, on paper they should be a lot better than they were, and they had a chance to do it last year, so they have an even better chance to do it this season. We're gonna talk about how excited are we for this roster? How excited versus reserved? And some other things. Do the Sixers need a power forward? Maybe some talk about one Adem Bona, who you were talking about his Rico Hines runs and things like that. And some other things, anything you guys want to throw in the chat, things like that. But first, this is brought to you by Game Time Ticket App. Game Time Ticket App is your go-to app for sporting events, and what makes it different than other ticket apps is the tickets get cheaper as the event gets near. So if you're buying tickets the day of, you're going to get a lot lower price than buying them in advance. That's how I live my life. I do everything last minute. I've never planned anything in my life, so this type of stuff works out for me, and this is the website right here. This is Phillies and Nationals on Friday. These should be dirt cheap right now, the way the Phillies have been playing. But they give you things like cheapest deal, flash deals, things like that. Hey, I was right. Look, $17 bucks. You can see the Phillies in Washington try to turn around the slump that they're currently having. Use promo code CLNS for $20 off. I didn't ask Game Time what happens when you buy a $17 ticket and you get $20 off. Do you get $3 back? I got to ask them that. I'm not sure. But go to gametime.co or use a Game Time ticket app and use the promo code CLNS for $20 off. Thank you to Game Time for sponsoring the channel. So let me get back to the screen that I want. Where's my producer at? Here we go. So like... let's do like a scale of 1 to 10, and in the chat also a scale of 1 to 10. How realistically excited are you for this upcoming 76ers season? Of course, crazy people like us, we're on a 10 no matter what, because it's Sixers basketball. It could be the process. I'm still excited that NBA is about to start, but scale of 1 to 10, taking everything into consideration, and the roster and how they looked last year and what they did this off season. What you go first, Sean, and then I'll give you mine.
I'll go 9.5 to give myself a little bit of 0.5 wiggle room, but that really just has to do with like the health concerns and the fact that you can't win a championship from day one, that there's going to be a long process to get there. I'm itching for the playoff setting to see this team, but obviously like it's a long path until we get to that point. But realistically, I don't think this offseason could have gone any better than it did. The only thing that I will throw in there is I do wish Nico Batum was returning back, but you can't really fault Daryl Morey or the Sixers team for that. But bringing in Paul George, I think Caleb Martin is going to be a huge factor on this Sixers team. I do think that is going to be a guy that, like, as much as there will be all these bright lights and big names with Maxey, with Embiid, with Paul George, Caleb Martin is going to be a guy that I think is going to be a fan favorite pretty much across the board there. So very excited about that. And even the guys like Andre Drummond, I do think is going to make a difference. So I think this was just about as seamless of an offseason as could have possibly gone. I'm very excited about the Sixers team, and frankly, I did not expect to be at this point leading into the season, so shout out to Daryl Morey for making it happen.
Yeah, man, like at least, he went into the season with all of the what do we need type of stuff, and it seems like he got everything that we need. Backup center, 3-and-D role players, veteran, playoff-tested players, all the way down to Reggie Jackson towards the end of buyout season. So, yeah, I'm gonna go 9. Also, just leeway for like, it could possibly be kind of a grueling type of season if we get into like a Kawhi Leonard style of load management where Paul George plays one night, Joel Embiid plays another night. You don't really see them play together too many games. It could turn into something like that. I don't want it to. Obviously, we want the whole team to play every night, but at the same time, the goal is to be healthy by the time the playoffs come around. That's always the goal. But yeah, that's the only concern really is I think that, and I'm so excited. It's unbelievable. It's probably really a 10. It probably is. The thing that I'm absolutely most excited for is not Paul George. is not healthy Joel Embiid, is not any player that they signed or added to the roster. It is year 5 Tyrese Maxey. I think Tyrese Maxey is about to take another leap. Every single season he's taken a leap. And I think he's about to take a leap this season that the rest of the NBA world is not quite ready for at all. They're not talking about him. They don't even understand, I think, what he's about to do. What he did in the playoffs was nothing short of amazing. The 2 50-point games in the playoffs, the only other players are Wilt Chamberlain and Allen Iverson. It's just, I think Tyrese Maxey could come close to actually being the leading scorer on this team this upcoming season. Not because Joel Embiid isn't as good as he can be, but I think Joel Embiid maybe takes a little bit of his foot off the gas as far as offensive, putting the entire team on his back. And, with Joel getting doubled and Paul George taking pressure, I mean, Tyrese Maxey, I just think he's going to have a field day with basically every NBA team. He could average 30. I really, really think that.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I still think he goes wildly underrated in the conversations across the best players in the NBA. That I think the national media and national just fans out there are unaware of just how good Tyrese Maxey is. And it is just crazy that every season he's not just gotten better, but taken notable leaps forward each season. And I expect the exact same this year. And you brought up a great point about Joel Embiid. That to me was my biggest takeaway from him experiencing the Olympics. Yes, it was cool to see him playing with the best guys. Yes, it was cool to see him winning a gold medal, get a taste of winning all these things. But the biggest thing that was noteworthy to me is him learning how to be effective in less of a ball dominant role or less of a high usage role. That Embiid's a guy who has never had under a 32% usage rate in any season of his career to this point. I would love to see a statistical reduction in his play this year. And that has nothing to do with a doubt in his ability or his play. When push comes to shove, we still know who Joel Embiid is as a talented basketball player. But I would love to see a little bit more sharing the wealth, everybody getting involved, maybe drop that from 34 points per game, which is insane last year, to a little bit down in that like 25 to 28 range. I would be really happy with that from Joel Embiid's perspective, especially if that means more playmaking, especially if that means a more focused defense, rebounding the ball at a little bit higher rate. That's the winning version of Joel Embiid in my brain. And to be fair to Embiid here, this is a two-way street that he hasn't necessarily had the guys to lean on in past years, so I can't be overly critical about that. He finally does, and now that is how this team needs to click together. So that'll definitely be something I'm paying attention to throughout the length of the season.
Yeah, I think we can also expect probably that, Tyrese Maxey becomes more of a scorer every season. Joel Embiid's become more of a facilitator every season. And last year he averaged a career high 5.7, I think, assists per game. So, yeah, you could see his scoring come down, and you could see him become even more of a facilitator. I know a lot of people talk about his turnovers or whatever, passing out of double teams, but I think he's improved every year. I don't ever think he's going to be great at it because he's 7'2" and he's big and trips over his own feet sometimes, and things happen. It's just what it is when you have a man that big handling a basketball outside of Nikola Jokic, who's just 1 in a billion. But yeah, I think you could see his assists be even higher. I think you're going to see more Joel Embiid triple doubles this season. There was like 1 or 2 maybe last season. I think he could get into the 5 or 10 triple double range. And then again, yeah, having Paul George as a third option is probably well, it is the best thing they could have done. But I mean, it's just yeah. I my excitement is a level 10. It really is, man.
Yeah, and even the pushback on the Paul George stuff, like there's obviously no such thing as the perfect basketball player in general, and kind of the critiques of Paul George, for the most part, I think fall on really only applying to him when he's the number 1 or number 2 option as far as the inconsistencies.
Exactly.
And I also think like the worst case scenario, he becomes a super like high level catch and shoot option for this team, and that's still a very functional and effective basketball player in the context of being around Joel Embiid. So like I get the concerns that like he's had his shortcomings, but I think this works for both Paul George and the Sixers, that Paul George himself realizes maybe the best role for me is to take a bit of a step back if I actually want to compete. And I honestly respect like the maturity that takes. Obviously, it comes with the dollar sign that's attached to it. This is solely motivated by good reasons there. When you think about Tobias Harris, once again, like the gap in talent as a basketball player between Paul George and Tobias Harris is so night and day different that we're talking miles of space there. And you just make that 1-for-1 swap in addition to adding these other talented players, the Caleb Martins, the Andre Drummonds, the Eric Gordons, who we have not brought up yet. This team is built for it in a way that I have not felt about the Sixers team in the entire Joel Embiid era.
Yeah, yeah, I agree completely. When you talk about Paul George and the things that are said about him, you're right. It applies to somebody who was expected to be leading a team deep into the playoffs, especially with Kawhi Leonard's health always up in the air. Maybe the best role for Paul George his entire career was a third option on a have two other really good scorers and him not be expected to be that. He's so talented and he was so super talented early on in his career that maybe that superstar title put on him was just not really. I mean, he was a superstar, but maybe he's just not a guy that can put a team on his back and drag him across the finish line. But that's great because we don't need him to be that. That's not what we signed him for. We really signed him to be a very highly paid third option scorer. If we get to the point where something would happen and you're relying on Paul George to lead you, then you don't expect much to happen. So I just think it works out perfectly. If he's more of a nonchalant, it sounded like he didn't really care at the end of the season with the Clippers and things like that. It seems like a perfect situation for somebody like that. That's what I think.
100% there. And like with all due respect to Paul George, there was a period of time in his early Indiana days where he was absolutely cold when he was going head to head with LeBron at the start in those Eastern Conference Finals. But let's not forget that was one of the more gruesome leg injuries I've ever seen that happened before that. That I think there's been a bit of a different Paul George, not as much explosion, not as much athleticism. It's still a very good basketball player throughout that entire process. And like the Clippers, I think more blame is thrown in Paul George's direction than necessarily should be the case. That if you want to pin down why that failed, why they never reached their championship aspirations, the number one thing is obviously to me Kawhi's injury. That is the thing. Like you never could consistently rely on him, and that's what everything was built around. That even in full effect, we've seen Kawhi Leonard carry a team to a championship. Us here in Philadelphia have seen it firsthand, way clearer than we would like.
Healthy prime Kawhi was
unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, like, with Paul George, he was always looked at as a bit of the running mate there, and he didn't have his leader to run with him far more often than I really think is the case. No, he was not perfect in Los Angeles, and I also, like, from the maturity standpoint, I think he's nailed everything since coming to the Sixers. His press conference, the way that he's spoken about guys, some of the podcast comments that are coming out. Obviously, it does not matter until you get on the floor and we see this as basketball. But I've loved everything I've seen about where Paul George's head is at. And to me, that is like important to note as you're kind of mixing in these personalities.
Yeah, speaking of guys losing athleticism as they age, I was watching some Joel Embiid early career highlights last night, and the absolute explosion and bounce that he had off the ball was crazy. And I try not to take athletes for granted. I try to watch as much as I can and cherish it because it's gone really fast. His career has, it's 8 years long now in what feels like 2 to me. But looking at the Olympics and how he played and the narrative of him being out of shape like, what do you think? Do you think he's just aging and getting slower? Do you think it has to do with his compounding knee injuries every year? What do you think it is? Because there's definitely, when you watch those early highlights, a clear difference. I mean, he was flying off the ball. He was dunking and landing and jumping, and now he dunks and he does a somersault because he doesn't want to land on his knees. What do you think? Do you think he's out of shape? Do you think it's just compounded injuries? Do you think he's just, what do you think?
Yeah, I think injuries is the number one reason. That's the first thing that I'll go to here, that we can't ignore the amount of knee injuries that this guy has sustained at this point in his career. Meniscus tears left and right, all the other issues that he's dealt with. And I would be naive if I not mention, like, I do think he could use to lose a little bit of weight. Now, my pushback here and what I think gets overlooked a lot is those aren't things that go together quite well. Like the best thing for Joel Embiid certainly is not running suicides on a daily basis when factoring in like these knee issues. So I think he gets like a lot of hate for like he'll miss 6 weeks recovering from an injury, and then people will be like, he looks so out of shape. It's like, well, what did you think you could be doing at that point? Like, sure, maybe you can get on the stationary bike a little bit or do low impact situations, but that's not replicating playing basketball. So it's a tough balance that he has to walk. I do think it would be best for him to cut a couple LBs and look a little thinner, a little closer to the 2018-19 version of Joel or how he came in the league. But the reality is, like, I think the injuries are the driving force of all this. I think he's naturally like a very big dude, and that like when he lets himself fill out, he certainly that happens pretty quickly. So I wish that to be the case, but I think it gets held against him a little bit more than he should, and that injuries are the real answer here.
Yeah, and his flat out just flat out skill with the ball is what's gonna let him play for hopefully 4, 5, 6 more years. Because if his athleticism declined and he didn't have that jump shot and he didn't have those balls, because he'd probably be done already. There, if he didn't have, he doesn't want, once you lose that explosion, if you can't shoot, you're thrown around to team like Russell Westbrook right now, pretty much. But Joel Embiid has the best jump shot I've ever seen from a person that size, up there with Dirk Nowitzki and everybody else. So that allows him to continue to decline athletically and continue to be great. But yeah, it just made me, I think, sad when I was watching it, because I'm like, damn, man, he was really bouncy, and that's over, and that's not coming back. He's not getting younger. It is what it is. That's part of life. But yeah, hopefully this is the year that we get it all together, man. So what do you think about the Sixers and the power forward position? This is something that people talk about all the time in my comments, on Instagram posts, whatever, is that we need a power forward, we need a power forward, we need a power forward. I think it looks like Daryl Morey went more like, no, we don't need a power forward. We're going to put Joel Embiid in the middle of the floor, and we're going to put 3-and-D guys around him, and we're going to go try to outscore the other team. Rebounding is something we always talk about as being an issue, especially at the power forward position. What do you think about the Sixers' power forward position?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think the conversation is a little bit more than it should be about it. That I think when push comes to shove, that your best 5 is going to play, and I think a lot of times that's the lineup that they already have and the players that are under contract without a true power forward. I also would say, like, look around the NBA as a whole and name how many true power forwards you can truly name for me. There's not a lot. Like, there's a lot of teams that are rolling in this direction. This is kind of how basketball is trending. Now, with that all being said, I still think there will be matchups where the Sixers will feel not having a true power forward. I think the Bucks from night one will be an example of that, of a team that is built to punish that and have additional size. So I still would like them to attack and get a guy to be an option, to be a big body that can help rebound. I wish I had a little bit more confidence in Joel being able to improve as a rebounder this year or hold things down from the team overall. I really don't feel that is the case. That I think we know what the book is from Joel Embiid as a rebounder at this point, that he is a guy who statistically will be there because he is 7'2" and constantly around the basket, but he's not a guy who has that skill or instinct as a rebounder, who knows where the ball is coming for that kind of thing. So I would like them to add a guy as an option. I certainly think that would be ideal, but I think ultimately, like, that while it will be a reason this team loses if they get bounced from the playoffs, I don't think that is as big of a sword to fall on as a lot of people are making it out to be.
Yeah, I think Nick Nurse got a lot more out of Joel Embiid rebounding-wise than coaches past. He doesn't naturally box out, probably because he's always been the biggest guy on the court every time he's played basketball anywhere. So it's something that he doesn't naturally do. But I feel like I did see him really bodying him and trying to box out more in those Nick Nurse-led playoff games. So maybe we finally have a coach, and I do think we finally have a coach who's not afraid to tell people like Joel Embiid or whoever, hey, you're doing this wrong. You're not doing this enough. We need more from you. And I just think that, Doc Rivers and Brett Brown were just buddy and really passive and didn't really try to get more out of players like that, as specifically like Joel Embiid, on just box out, bro. Throw your body in front of people. As far as like KJ Martin and the potential trade, because when you talk about a big rebounding power forward, I think he also has to be able to shoot the ball. He has to be able to catch and shoot the three. It's not easy to find guys like that. Dorian Finney-Smith is a name that's always around. And then the Sixers give KJ Martin a balloon deal. I did see a tweet that you had about KJ Martin and his if he becomes somewhat of a 3-point shooter, do they actually keep him past the trade deadline and not move him? But obviously the idea, the plan there is to take that salary and include him in a trade that could equal that money coming back for somebody like Dorian Finney-Smith or another stretch for power forward type. What do you think about the KJ Martin situation and the role that his contract could play in getting a power forward like that?
Yeah, I certainly think that's the most likely route that the Sixers take is they do ship off his contract. A guy that jumps out to me, Kenrick Williams, is a name for the Oklahoma City Thunder that I see kind of being squeezed out of the core that they have here with all the young talent that they do have that I think would be a much cleaner fit on this Sixers team. Dorian Finney-Smith, to me, is just not as high-level a rebounder as I would like for kind of the missing piece. I think, like, with KJ Martin, I'm not Mr. KJ Martin by any means, but I do think we forget he's still 24. This is a guy that has some upside to him, and, like, one of his strengths on the basketball court is his athleticism and rebounding. So, like, I hear it as like that's financially the best route. I just think they should be sure that that is an improvement, and especially when we're talking about attaching draft picks and making sure that is the case. There really was not that many options as far as trades when you look back at last offseason. It wouldn't or last trade deadline would not surprise me. It's a similar situation for this specific trade deadline. The biggest thing that they have to their advantage is Daryl Morey being extremely careful about the cap numbers, and that's been this cap space plan and clearing out all that money. So they could look to kind of vulture and help some teams out that are looking to shed salary for something like that. They still have enough wiggle room to play with for that type of maneuver. But I do think like just be very careful because you kind of really only have that's the one move that you do have left on this team. I think it's likely that Martin is traded and they bring somebody back, but you really only get one shot at it is kind of my cautionary tale.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely, definitely. I liked what he did last year defensively. I thought his on-ball defense at times was one of the best on the team on the perimeter.
He grew on me. He grew on me throughout the year, big time.
Yeah, there was times where, you know, we were trying to break a zone and it ended up being KJ Martin, the guy we were using running to like the free throw line to break a zone and then backdoor cut and things like that. He definitely, I feel like, found more of a role and improved a lot and then didn't get any minutes in the playoffs. But yeah, I became in the beginning of that, like right after the Harden trade, I thought KJ Martin was the worst NBA player I've ever seen. I couldn't find a single skill that he had. And then once we started to like it became clear like we need rebounding, we need defense, and he became one of those guys. I really became a big fan of KJ Martin for what he was good at, and Nick Nurse using him for that specific thing and not putting him in other situations where you can expose his lack of, you know, other skills. But yeah, obviously it's his shooting in general would have to be a little bit of something for you to keep him and you know, justify $18 million. So yeah, I think he definitely ends up getting moved too. But yeah, I would like to. Hopefully he improves, man. I'm excited. I'm excited for a lot of guys, and I think KJ Martin's also one of them that could give you a little bit more this upcoming season. Before we get out of here, let's talk about the guy you were talking about, the Rico Hines runs, Adem Bona. This guy who was drafted in the second round. He was dominating the summer league for a couple of games. I mean, rebounds, putbacks, dunking on people, just looked like an animal. He looks like a complete steal out of the second round. Again, also not known as a floor stretcher. But what do you think about Adem Bona and the role that he could possibly play on the Sixers team this year?
Yeah, I think it's a home run of a second-round pick. It's a guy whose floor as a basketball player is really high, particularly for the second round. Those tend to be more project players. I can tell you exactly what Adem Bona is going to look like on a night-to-night basis. That he's going to block shots, he's going to set screens, and he's going to catch lobs, and he's going to rebound the basketball. That's what he's going to do. Beyond that, I still have my questions. I believe he attempted 2 mid-range jumpers in the entirety of his college career. He's very much known for the defensive side of the ball. Now, I will say, like, the free throw form looks pretty good. I know the numbers weren't great, particularly his freshman season. As a sophomore, a little better, and in summer league that he knocked him down at a pretty reliable rate. Had a game where he went 6 for 6 and things like that. So I'm pretty optimistic about what he can grow into. I'm not as optimistic as him being one of these like the power forward they're missing or a guy that can play next to Joel. I think his skill set is very like Clint Capella-like and very the bare bones of a center. Now, like I don't necessarily mean that as a critique. He can make himself quite a bit of money and stick around the NBA for quite a long time with that being the case. So I like Bona quite a bit. I do think that was a terrific pick in the second round. But I think on the nights when Joel's not there, we're gonna see his usage as a backup center. I don't see if I don't think we're gonna see a ton of him overall on the year.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would agree with that. Probably, yeah, mostly in games where Joel's not playing and you're starting Andre Drummond, and then he's in the backup center role. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it doesn't feel like you can play him alongside Joel Embiid at least probably this upcoming season, and I think definitely you probably can't play him alongside Andre Drummond on like a bench lineup. That would be insane. Bully ball with no shooting, no spacing. Yeah, I agree with that. But that's just a player that I'm definitely excited to see what he brings to the table, and at least we can say the Sixers definitely made a very solid attempt to try to shore up the backup center position because it's been a talking point for a long time. As soon as Joel Embiid goes to the bench, everything falls apart. Somehow Paul Reed became completely unplayable. So we should be excited for at least the solid attempt at the backup center position. And I'm just looking forward to it, man. Anything else you got, Sean? Anything else you want to talk about? Anything else you want to throw out there?
Yeah, I'll throw one more your way. Has your mind shifted at all from your anti-Jared McCain takes from when that was first taken out? What are your thoughts on McCain now that you've seen him a little bit more?
Yeah, I don't think my takes were ever anti-Jared McCain. I mean, his TikToks make me want to jump off a bridge. Don't get me wrong, like it's just cringe, but that's me being from a different era. It has nothing to do with him. I just didn't understand the pick, and I'm never really gonna understand it because even if he does pan out, can you play him and Tyrese Maxey together? You know, the pick will never really make much sense to me. I think Daryl Morey loves his own Tyrese Maxey selection, and I think that he thought I just found another Tyrese Maxey, which he could be, but can you play two Tyrese Maxeys together? You know, so now I hope Jared McCain's good, man. I hope he has a great NBA career, but I hope he plays a role off the bench for the Sixers as at least a Buddy Hield type of role, catch and shoot guy or backup shooting guard, 3-point shooter. Well, didn't shoot great in the summer league, had some really bad spurts, but you know, he was a great 3-point shooter in college. I hope he plays a role off the bench. I just will never really understand the pick as far as the future because if he pans out, what role does he have? Because Tyrese Maxey is that role, really, in my opinion. So that's my take on Jared McCain. Maybe he becomes a really big trade piece a couple years from now. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's completely fair. There's absolutely like basketball validity to not liking the pick. And frankly, I'm kind of surprised he was a Daryl Morey guy, that I feel like there is other players that are a little more up his alley. I know the Dalton Connect's going to be the name he's constantly attached to for likely his career there. I do really like Jared McCain as a basketball player, and it's interesting, like, they used him as Duke pretty much differently than he's ever been used in his life, that he's been such a traditional point guard, and then they really used him as kind of this off-ball bomber. That's kind of the role that I think the Sixers have envisioned for him a little more, that he is a more willing shooter than a guy like Buddy Hield, that, like, this is the same Jared McCain that in the NCAA tournament knocked down 8 3-pointers and has basically put a team to sleep at the half. Like, those are the type of high-volume looks that he can knock down from three. I've also been pretty impressed by like his feel for the game and kind of the point guard reads. I wish we saw a little bit more of it in summer league. Jeff Doughton took a lot of those looks away from him, which I just kind of, we know who Jeff Doughton is. I would like to find out a little bit more about who Jared McCain is at this point. I don't have super high expectations for what he means in year one, but I do think like they're filling this roster with just guys that are really good basketball players. And I think there'll be a couple of nights this season where we see like, okay, this is what Jared McCain can do in the long run in the NBA.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited. There's definitely a lot of storylines. There's a lot of things to look forward to, and we're gonna find out. Unfortunately, it's about 2 months from now. But here we are in the dog days of the NBA offseason, and Sean's here helping me out, helping me fill some of the time and continue to talk about this team and give the people some content, man. Thanks for coming through, Sean. I appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good chopping it up. We gotta do something to keep the withdrawal, of Sixers basketball. Got to fight it off. So
absolutely
talking it out.
Absolutely, man. Hey, take care, buddy. I'll talk to you soon, and we'll do it again before the off season's over. Definitely.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Sean Bernard, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody, hit the like button. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you very soon.